Supreme Court is clearing the way for President Trump to move forward with key portions of his executive order involving mail-in voting. ABC's senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer has more on the court's decision.
Andrew, this was a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court, with the conservative justices voting in President Trump's favor to allow him now to begin to implement some key portions of that March 2026 executive order that imposed some new regulations around mail-in voting in the United States just now ahead of the November elections. This was an executive order that was challenged by a coalition of Democratic-led states, in their view, as an unconstitutional infringement of how elections are administered. But the Supreme Court, in its decision today, said that the executive order actually hasn't had any bite yet. It hasn't harmed any of the states just yet. And therefore, the president should be able to continue with his policies as he sees fit. What are those policies? The president, with his executive order, is now going to be allowed to direct the Department of Homeland Security to compile a citizenship list, a federal citizenship list, and to distribute it to the states, to also then direct the Attorney General to prosecute any state and any state official that would happen to give a mail-in ballot to someone who is not on those citizenship lists, and to work with the U.S. Postal Service to come up with new standardized regulations for mail-in ballots, barcodes, size provisions, that sort of thing. States have been waiting to see those. They've been warning about increased costs just months before the election. But again, today, the Supreme Court saying all of that can proceed for now, but very carefully also noting that time will tell whether the president, in fact, violates the law in implementing this. In dissent, I should say, Andrew, the 3 liberal justices sounded off on this dispute, warning that the court was looking away from the president's true intention of seeking to restrict mail-in voting, which is the province of states to administer. But they were dissenting today, the conservatives winning the day for now, as the battle over mail-in voting is likely to continue ahead of the November election. Andrew.
Hello. Bobby Jones here for MeidasTouch and Valor Media Networks. So the Supreme Court had a ruling this week on President Trump's executive order that restricts mail-in voting. Now, I know there have been a lot of debates on, voter fraud via mail-in ballots, even though a majority of people in rural areas will use mail-in ballots to vote due to the convenience. And the president himself has used mail-in voting in Florida for years. But Executive Order 14399, ensuring citizenship verification and integrity in federal elections, is a little bit different. But it's not even about the restrictions that really caused me to pause. It's about who it actually restricts, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. And that happens to be members of the United States military. Let's get into why that is the case. First of all, reminder, voting is a function of the states, not the federal government. This was done on purpose because states know their people best, and it helps stop, say, a president or chief executive from hijacking elections from the national level. And so what President Trump did with this executive order, he ordered the Department of Homeland Security to create a state citizenship list. This list will basically be all of the eligible voters that the federal government says, based on birth certificates and other things, that will then be allowed to vote via mail-in ballot. Now, here's the key thing. Mail-in ballots are supposed to be accepted up to 45 days before the election based on the list. 60 days is what this executive order is now counting for. So what I mean by that is you can register to vote, but if you have not done so within 60 days of your election, then you will not be on that state list that goes to the federal government. And then the federal government will not allow the United States Postal Service to deliver your ballot. So to recap, there's a 60-day limitation on when you can be on this state citizenship list verified by the federal government, even though you should have, by the letter of the law, 45 days. So they use this list to basically make it harder to vote. And then the Department of Justice is directed to investigate and prosecute any officials who try to allow names on this list after that date. So this week, the Supreme Court ruled on one of two injunctions that are supposed to come in front of them, saying right now we will allow President Trump to execute his executive order. Again, reminder, the Supreme Court is saying that the president at the federal level can initiate an order that affects states' rights when it comes to vote. So he is not taking away mail-in ballots, but he has restricted the timeline that is used to submit them. Why does this matter? This matters because if the United States Postal Service is shutting out voter lists based on this requirement, 60 days out, this could cause problems for those who are deployed, especially now. Widespread reports of how mail, specifically for the United States Navy, has not reached sailors. Okay. In order for us to vote on deployment, we have to do it by mail, and we have to rely on the United States Postal Service because it feeds into the Fleet Postal Office and all these other mechanisms that we have. It's not like you can FedEx your ballot. Well, due to the logistical issues, specifically in the Middle East, these ballots may take longer to get to where they need to go, longer than even the 45 days that's normally acceptable. It could take 2 months. We don't know. It could be, your ballot could be sitting in a storage area someplace, or unfortunately, when those storage areas got hit, specifically in Bahrain and UAE, they could be gone.
A quick word about something serious. The Washington Post just reported FBI numbers on elder fraud. $7.7 billion reported stolen from Americans over 60 last year, much of it by criminals impersonating Medicare and Social Security. The average victim lost nearly $40,000, and almost none of it comes back. In aviation, we cross-checked everything because trusting the wrong signals gets people killed. The same discipline applies on Medicare. Make the call yourself to Chapter. They're the only Medicare advisor that looks at every plan in the country. They're honest. They're not paid to steer you toward any particular plan. And if you're already on the right one, they'll tell you. Their help is free, takes under 20 minutes, and they've saved people an average of $1,100 a year. If you're on Medicare or if you're helping a parent navigate it, call Chapter at 765-417-4729. Consider it your cross-check. That's 765-417-4729 to talk to Chapter today.
It boggles the mind that this would even be made more complicated for deployed service members. But then the citizenship requirements of having birth certificates scanned, etc., and on record with the federal government. I don't know about you, but my time in the Navy, we really didn't scan much and try to email or send it or have someone print it out for us. It's very complicated when all of this was not required less than a couple of months ago. And so now during this conflict that you have happening all over the world, the sailors, the service members who are dealing with it, who want to be able to vote on their representatives and who and what they send to Congress, now have a much more difficult time through no fault of their own. Why does this matter? I'll tell you why this matters. Because overwhelmingly, late arrivals of mail-in ballots are the number one reason why they are discounted. And so if you're saying that you have less time to submit your ballot and you are deployed in, I don't know, a combat zone where it's even harder, but for the first time in a long time, the logistics train that allows mail to get to and from you have been purposely destroyed by Iran. What is a service member deployed supposed to do to vote? Now, I'm not trying to just focus on mail and say this is how President Trump is not supporting the troops, but this is timely because these midterm elections are probably going to be some of the highest turnout elections we have seen in recent memory. And when you look overall at the things that President Trump has done to service members, right? What he said about service members, when you see that epic fury, or this operation they want to call it, has literally decimated the places these service members call home temporarily, you've got to ask yourself, why would you do this? Why not carve out an exception for your service members in your executive order if this is all about election integrity? Well, the real reason is it's not about election integrity. It's about trying to maintain power. Just like the actions in Iran were trying to maintain power, trying to distract, trying to take away. And the people who are suffering the most are the service members and their dependents who, by the way, are displaced in the Middle East. This is terrible. This is terrible. But most importantly, the people most affected by these decisions have a harder time being heard due to this executive order.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.